Welcome to the Brand Together podcast. Join host Brett Ryan to dive deep and go behind the scenes of successful brand partnerships. Featuring pros from every industry and vertical, from mega brands to startups and everything in between. The Brand Together podcast is essential listening for anyone interested in learning more about brand partnerships. Are you ready? Let's dive into part 2 of a 2-part episode.
Okay, so it's useful to understand the difference between luxury and premium. So I want to circle around to another question that comes to mind. If we got two brands that are partnered, we got a luxury brand and an accessible brand, can we talk about a pro-con list for each one of those brands, what they're trying to get out of it, benefits, what the risks might be, that kind of thing?
It's interesting. When it comes to the luxury space, it's very competitive, especially as marketing has become more and more digital, as there's been more companies that have entered this space as well. And you're looking at these luxury companies, some of which have been around for over 100 years. How do those companies stay relevant? How do those companies stay unique? How do those companies reach younger consumers nowadays? So I really think that co-marketing and this high-low collaboration is very valuable to these luxury brands in that aspect to reach this wider audience, to maintain their relevancy and that uniqueness factor, because there are so many of them that are traditional heritage brands. So to that point, I think expanded reach is a huge benefit to these luxury brands. I also think that the marketing that comes out of it, you get so much exposure, so much buzz and attention. It's really having this co-marketing opportunity, or this collaboration is a marketing opportunity. In addition to that, you are able to produce your product or extend your brand in a more affordable way by tapping into this low or accessible brands mass production and distribution. So you are leveraging their infrastructure to do that. And that way you can provide products at a lower price point. And that really also informs what kind of products you're delivering. So for example, you might want to enter into a new product category that you haven't considered before. And that innovation is another benefit that really comes out of this partnership. And lastly, I would say revenue, if done well, some of these high-low partnerships can really bring that luxury company or that luxury brand a lot of revenue, whether it be in royalties or whether it be because of the additional customers that you were acquiring that you weren't able to tap into before. So there's ultimately lots of benefits. In that same token, there's lots of risks. So you don't have complete control of top to bottom production and distribution.
I think that's one of the biggest things. Let's go back to DVF and Target. DVF is placing a lot of trust in Target to produce a good shower curtain, right? And if it's terrible, if it falls apart, if it's toxic or melts when hot water hits it or whatever, DVF could be months and some huge sum of money into a collaboration. And the ultimate output is dependent on that partner executing on their core competencies. If they don't, for whatever reason, no, it's interesting. It's like that you can always pull out, but you can't mitigate the risk completely up front.
Absolutely. And you were just saying in store, think about also digitally. So with Ticketmaster, people were looking at Taylor Swift tickets. They couldn't get the ticket, but think about the same thing. You're trying to get this DVF shower curtain and the Target website breaks down. But you're going to have disgruntled customers who are having negative experiences because they can't get their product. So in addition to just that quality element, it's also how are the customers acquiring these products? So there's a lot of oversight that both partners need to have in order to ensure that this is truly a strategic and mutually beneficial partnership, because once you lose a customer, it's really hard to get them back. And that speaks to both the luxury brand and the more accessible brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. You bring up a good point. It's like you're partnering with that company, not just for the end product, but also the distribution and delivery. You're really partnering with that other brand for the entire customer experience, right? You've got
That's
to
right.
recognize and understand what each partner is bringing to that experience so that it's amazing and blows everyone's hair back instead of being something neutral or negative, right?
Correct. And when you're having those partnership discussions, it's really important to think through not just what the initial objective is, but thinking through how are all of the actions that we're taking from production to getting this in the customer's hands, how are my goals and my brand reflected throughout all of that to really ensure that you are delivering a consistent experience, that you're not alienating any customers, and that you're not diluting your brand equity through this partnership.
Okay, so let's put the shoe on the other foot real quick. What about pros and cons of these high-low partnerships for the low brand, the accessible brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of similar benefits as there would be for the luxury brand. One of those, of course, being reaching out to a customer base that you potentially weren't already penetrating. Going back to DVF and Target, maybe you're a DVF loyal customer. You don't frequently shop at Target. Maybe you usually go to Walmart, or sometimes you go to Target. But because of this collaboration, you're online checking out your DVF by Target products, and you're also going to purchase some additional items maybe that you're adding to your shopping cart. So there is that new customer that's coming in that wouldn't have already been coming into your store. They're buying or adding additional items to their shopping cart in addition to the items from the high-low collaboration. And then also for Target or this accessible brand, you are usually these high-low collaborations are selling at a higher price point for the accessible brand. So the DVF products, maybe a DVF wastebasket for the bathroom might be priced at $50, whereas a Target brand one would have been $25. So Target is getting that additional revenue or incremental revenue as well from this opportunity. And then I would also say that by this accessible brand partnering with a luxury brand, they're really elevating their status as a brand. Like that perception is heightened.
It reminds me of Nike. Nike started out as a running shoe brand, and eventually it became a brand that is synonymous with elite athleticism. The way they did that is by getting their basketball shoes on the best NBA players. And it's not just basketball, right? It's nowadays we want to get into golf. Let's partner with Tiger Woods, right? They seek out the best athletes, and what they're doing back in the 70s, they were changing their brand positioning. Nowadays, they reinforce their brand positioning as a brand that represents elite athleticism by doing that, right? So what I think I'm hearing you say is that Target as a retailer positions itself against its competitors. And by having luxury brands like DVF offered from Target as a retailer, they are reinforcing a positioning that they want to take against their competitor set. Is that right?
Yes. So if as a competitor to Target, you have Walmart and Kmart, whatever. Does Kmart still exist? I don't know.
I don't know.
Walmart.
Yeah.
And this, by partnering with DVF, the gap between the two and of Target being that more like premium shopping experience or brand is more distinguished by these partnerships.
Yeah. And it's interesting because positioning is always relative, right? And earlier offline, you and I were talking about Neiman Marcus, or you could even go even as far as Nordstrom. Like in the grand scope of things, Target isn't the highest of the high end, right? But they position themselves a certain way against their main competitors, which are the Walmarts, the Costcos. And so if those partnerships reinforce the positioning they're trying to set against their immediate competitor set, I think that's a huge benefit. I think that's part of the strategy behind that partnership.
And also adding to that, if there's a spectrum of this all you can get store, which is, we're saying Target, that has home supplies, maybe clothing, etc. So Walmart's at one end, let's say, and at another end, we can go to what we were just speaking to, Nordstrom. If Target wants to position itself closer to Nordstrom, having a partnership with somebody like DVF who sells products at Nordstrom would allow it to be closer in that side of the spectrum in customers' eyes. And maybe if you're going to throw a dinner party, instead of going to Nordstrom, where I usually go as a shopper, perhaps I would go to Target because I know that they have these partnerships and that they might have what I'm looking for.
Yep. You could still throw a pretty rad dinner party and no one's going to turn their nose up at your cookware or whatever, right? The way you set the table, if it comes from Target instead of Nordstrom. Oh, that makes total sense. I love that. Okay, well, what are we missing, Mercedes?
Yeah, I think just to speak to some of the risks or cons that can come for that accessible brand when it comes to operating with this luxury brand. Again, similar risks as what we were talking about with the luxury brand. You don't have complete control, and there is the risk that the ultimate output does not align with what the intended goal was or does not align with your brand, and potentially turns away customers who are loyal to you. So for example, if you're Target, again, going back to the Target DVF example, if you're Target and you've partnered with DVF and the wastebasket that you're selling as part of this collaboration is, I don't know, just throwing this out there, $300, you're going to alienate the customers who typically go to your store for high quality, low priced items.
Sure. So to use some of your language from earlier in our conversation, it's like you want the output of that partnership to be in the overlapping area of the Venn diagram.
Correct.
It's got to be at the convergence somewhere of those two circles. Because if it's not, you might win big with the new audience you're trying to reach. But if you don't win big with your core customers, it still might be a net negative event for your brand.
Absolutely.
So, and what you said, you mentioned it twice now in both our examples. So it's sticking out to me now is the very nature of partnerships is that you don't have complete control. If we just back all the way up and say, why do brands partner? If we've got so many salary hours of work we can do in a given time period, why would we partner with another company or brand where we don't have full control, as opposed to just investing that time, that effort in a solo initiative? And it's this idea like 1 + 1 has to equal 3. It's I want to access the core competencies or to support an output that would delight my customers that I couldn't do very easily on my own. Taco Bell probably could have come up with their own spiced taco shell, but they went to Doritos and said, make this taco with us. And man, they nailed that area of the Venn diagram and really pleased their core customers, but did something that Doritos arguably just does better and is world-class at, making corn snacks. That might not be the greatest example, but I think...
No, it is, because that's Doritos' core competency. And Taco Bell is leveraging that brand name with their new product, and there's synergies there. It is mutually beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Mercedes, I think we're about at the end of the rope here. Mercedes, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It was a pleasure to have you.
It was such a pleasure to talk with you today, Brett.
Yeah, we were able to dig pretty deep on some of these finer points of brand partnerships, and I appreciate that. So if I'm a listener to the show and I want to connect with Mercedes Castro, how do I do that? How do people find you?
Yeah, I would just say my LinkedIn. You can find me. It's Mercedes P. Castro. I'm friends with Brett, so that's another way to find me. I would say ping me or message me through LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you more soon.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
This has been another episode of the Brand Together podcast with your host, Brett Ryan. Join us again next week for another deep dive into brand partnerships. And remember to subscribe to the Brand Together podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or anywhere else podcasts are found.